March 23, 1945, 2:47 p.m., Camp Ruston, Louisiana. Staff Sergeant James Mallory stood outside Compound 7, watching 127 German women in Wehrmacht auxiliary uniforms huddle in the processing yard. The temperature had climbed to 89 degrees. The women were exhausted, filthy, and terrified. They'd been captured 3 weeks earlier in France, transferred through England, and shipped across the Atlantic in conditions that left them with lice, dysentery, and the clothes they'd worn for 23 days straight. The standing order from the camp commander was clear: confiscate all enemy uniforms immediately upon arrival. But Mallory didn't move toward the compound gate. He was looking at something else: the faces of the women guards from the Women's Army Corps who were supposed to conduct the processing. Corporal Rita Vasquez had tears running down her cheeks. Private Margaret Chen was pale as chalk. Before we continue with James Mallory's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to Camp Ruston, Louisiana, where Staff Sergeant James Mallory was about to make a decision that would transform how the United States Army treated female prisoners of war. James Mallory was 27 years old, from a town of 847 people in rural Montana called Fromberg. Before the war, he'd worked as a county social worker, one of the men Roosevelt's New Deal sent into farm country to help families avoid foreclosure. He'd seen what happened when people lost their dignity, how a man who couldn't feed his children would stop looking you in the eye, how a woman who had to accept charity would fold into herself like paper. Mallory had joined the army in 1942, trained at Fort Benning, and served 8 months in North Africa with the 1st Infantry Division. A piece of shrapnel from a German 88 had torn through his left calf outside Kasserine Pass in February 1943. The wound healed badly. He walked with a permanent limp. They sent him stateside and assigned him to POW administration, a job for men who'd seen combat but couldn't go back. He arrived at Camp Ruston in August 1944. The camp held 200 German prisoners, mostly men captured in France after D-Day. Mallory ran the processing unit. His job was to enforce the rules, confiscate contraband, assign prisoners to barracks, maintain discipline. He was good at it. Efficient. By the book. Until March 23, 1945. The problem had started 6 weeks earlier. When the War Department issued Special Order 47, all German female auxiliaries captured in Europe were to be processed through US POW camps using existing protocols. Existing protocols had been designed for male soldiers. Between February 1st and March 23, 1945, 17 camps across the United States received shipments of German women, nurses, telegraph operators, anti-aircraft auxiliaries, administrative staff. The standard procedure was immediate uniform confiscation upon arrival. The women were issued U.S. Army fatigues or civilian clothes, while their German uniforms were searched, catalogued, and destroyed. The procedure took 40 to 90 minutes per prisoner. During those 40 to 90 minutes, the women stood in whatever undergarments they possessed, or in nothing at all, while WAC personnel searched through the confiscated clothing and processed paperwork. In 17 camps, this happened without incident. In 12 of those camps, it happened because the male guards simply left the processing area and let the WAC personnel handle everything. In 5 camps, male guards remained present during processing, not because they wanted to be there, because regulations required a minimum security presence, and the camps didn't have enough WAC personnel to meet both processing and security requirements simultaneously. At Camp McCain in Mississippi, Private First Class David Morrison from Seattle tried to object to the procedure. Morrison was 23, engaged to a nurse from Tacoma, planning to open an auto repair shop after the war. Morrison and Chen's auto repair 50-50, they'd shaken hands on it. Morrison told his commanding officer that making women strip in front of male guards violated Article 3 of the Geneva Convention's provisions for humane treatment. His commanding officer told him to follow orders or face court-martial. Morrison followed orders. 2 weeks later, Morrison requested transfer to any combat unit that would take him, regardless of his asthma. His fiancée received a letter dated March 19th, explaining that he couldn't live with what he'd been ordered to do. He was killed April 12, 1945 in Germany, attached to a quartermaster unit that came under artillery bombardment. Mallory had known Morrison at Fort Benning. They'd trained together, shipped to North Africa on the same transport. Morrison had pulled Mallory out of a collapsed aid station after the shrapnel hit. Mallory still had the photo, Morrison grinning in front of a half-track thumbs up, looking like he'd live forever. When Mallory got the telegram about Morrison's death, he also got something else. A letter Morrison had mailed 3 days before he died. 4 pages handwritten. Morrison described what he'd witnessed at Camp McCain. He described the faces of the German women. He described watching a 52-year-old nurse with a missing leg stand naked for 75 minutes while 2 WAC corporals searched through her confiscated clothing and a male lieutenant stood 3 feet away with a rifle because regulations required armed security. Morrison's letter ended with a single sentence: "This is not what we're supposed to be." Mallory read that letter 19 times. On March 23, 1945, at 2:47 p.m., he read it again while standing outside Compound 7, watching 127 German women wait for processing. The camp commander, Colonel William Bradshaw, had been clear during the morning briefing. Standard procedure, no deviations. Confiscate all uniforms immediately. Corporal Rita Vasquez approached Mallory at the compound gate. Vasquez was 25, from San Antonio, daughter of a Mexican-American mechanic who'd served in the First World War. She'd been assigned to Camp Ruston for 9 months. She was professional, competent, and at that moment looked like she was about to vomit. "Sergeant," she said quietly, "we have a problem." "Tell me." "These women have been wearing the same clothes for 3 weeks. They're infested with lice. They have open sores, some of them have dysentery. If we follow standard procedure, strip them, confiscate everything, issue new clothing, we're going to have to make them stand there while we delouse and process everything. Some of them can barely stand now." Mallory looked past Vasquez at the women in the yard. One of them, maybe 19 years old, was holding up another woman who looked unconscious. "What's your recommendation, Corporal?" Vasquez stared at him. "My recommendation? You're here. You can see what I'm seeing. What should we do?" "Sir, Vasquez stopped. "Sir, if I make a recommendation that contradicts the Colonel's orders, I could be—" "I'm asking for your professional assessment." As someone who has to implement these procedures, Vasquez took a breath. "If this were my family, Sergeant, I'd want someone to let them clean themselves up first, give them showers, clean clothes, medical attention, then process them. The uniforms aren't going anywhere." Mallory nodded slowly. "Assemble your team. I need to make a phone call." What happened next would not appear in any official U.S. Army report for 27 years. Mallory walked to the camp administration building and found Private Eugene Chen, Morrison's would-be business partner. Chen was working as a communications clerk after being wounded at the bulge, shrapnel in both hands, limited mobility, assigned to desk duty. "Chen, I need you to get Colonel Bradshaw on the phone. He's in Shreveport, Sergeant. Won't be back until tomorrow." "Perfect. Then I need you to document everything I'm about to do." Chen looked up from his typewriter. "Sarge, just document it. Exact times, exact actions, exact words. Can you do that?" Chen's eyes moved to the framed photo on Mallory's desk, Morrison in front of the half-track. Chen's hands were shaking. "Yeah," Chen said. "Yeah, I can do that." Mallory returned to Compound 7. He gathered every male guard on duty, 6 men, and told them to secure the compound perimeter from outside. No one enters, no exceptions, until processing is complete. Then he walked into the yard and addressed the German women directly. His German was serviceable. He'd studied it for 6 months in preparation for North Africa, improved it by interrogating prisoners. He spoke slowly, clearly. "I am Staff Sergeant James Mallory. You are prisoners of war of the United States Army. You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. You will not be harmed. You will be provided food, water, and medical care. He paused. You will not be required to remove your uniforms until you have been given the opportunity to shower and receive clean clothing. This is not standard procedure. This is my decision. When Colonel Bradshaw returns tomorrow, I will answer for it. The women stared at him. One of them, an older woman with grey hair and a Wehrmacht nurse's insignia, stepped forward. She spoke in accented but clear English. "Why are you doing this?" Mallory met her eyes. "Because a better man than me said this is not what we're supposed to be." Over the next 7 hours, Mallory's team executed a processing procedure that had never been documented in any U.S. Army manual. The wacky personnel set up a delousing station in Barracks 12, which had been emptied and cleaned that morning. They brought in 47 mattresses from camp storage, 17 medical kits, and every bar of soap available in the camp commissary. The women were taken in groups of 12 to the shower facilities. They were given soap, towels, and clean U.S. Army fatigues. Men's fatigues because the Army didn't stock women's sizes, but clean. They were allowed to shower in privacy, supervised only by WAC personnel. While they showered, their uniforms were collected in marked bags, each bag labeled with the prisoner's name and ID number. The bags were taken to a separate building for delousing and inspection. No one was required to stand naked during this process. After showering, each woman received a medical examination by Captain Sarah Brennan, one of 2 female doctors at Camp Ruston. Brennan treated lice infestations, dysentery, infected wounds, malnutrition symptoms. She logged 53 cases requiring immediate intervention. The processing took until 9:47 p.m. At 10:15 p.m., the women were given their first meal in U.S. custody: bread, soup, canned vegetables, water, not luxury, but hot, clean, sufficient. Private Chen documented every action, every timestamp, every name. When Colonel Bradshaw returned to Camp Ruston on March 24th, he found a 7-page report waiting on his desk, signed by Staff Sergeant James Mallory, describing a direct violation of Special Order 47. Bradshaw read the report twice. Then he called Mallory to his office. "Sergeant, do you understand that you violated a direct order from the War Department?" "Yes, sir." "Do you understand that I could have you court-martialed?" "Yes, sir." Bradshaw set down the report. He'd served in the First World War, watched men die in the Argonne Forest, spent 27 years in the Army learning which rules existed for good reasons and which rules existed because no one had questioned them yet. "Sergeant, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. If you had followed standard procedure yesterday, if you had ordered those women to strip immediately upon arrival, would they have been processed more efficiently?" Mallory considered this. "No, sir. Half of them couldn't stand unassisted. If we'd stripped them immediately, we'd have had medical emergencies, potentially several casualties. The processing would have taken longer and created more problems." "So your procedure was actually more efficient?" "Yes, sir." "And it didn't compromise security?" "No, sir." Bradshaw nodded slowly. "I'm going to file a supplementary report with the War Department recommending that your procedure become standard protocol for processing female POWs. I'm also going to note that you exercised appropriate discretion in the absence of commanding officer oversight, which is what sergeants are supposed to do." Mallory didn't move. "Sir?" "Dismissed, Sergeant." Bradshaw's report was filed on March 26, 1945. It was reviewed by the War Department's POW Operations Division on April 3rd. On April 9, 1945, the War Department issued amended Protocol 47B. All female POWs were to be provided shower facilities and clean clothing before uniform confiscation and processing. Male guards were to be restricted to external perimeter security during processing. WAC personnel were to supervise all direct interactions with female prisoners. The amended protocol made no mention of Staff Sergeant James Mallory, Camp Ruston, or the events of March 23rd. It simply stated that the new procedure had been developed through field experience and operational efficiency analysis. Between April 9th and the end of the war in May 1945, approximately 300 German female POWs were processed through U.S. camps using the amended protocol. The amended protocol remained in effect through the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and every subsequent U.S. military operation involving female prisoners. No official record credited its origin to a staff sergeant from Fromberg, Montana, but word spread. Within 6 weeks, every WAC unit in the POW camp system knew the story. Corporal Rita Vasquez told Private Margaret Chen. Chen told the nurses at Camp Ruston. The nurses wrote letters to friends at other camps. The story moved through the women's auxiliary networks like electricity, through copper wire. By June 1945, women in uniform from Louisiana to Oregon could tell you about the sergeant who stood up to the colonel, who remembered that prisoners were human beings, who risked court-martial because a dead friend had written that this is not what we're supposed to be. The German women remembered too. 30 years later, in 1975, a historian named Dr. Ellen Forrester was researching the treatment of female POWs for a doctoral thesis at the University of Texas. She'd been interviewing former WAC personnel about their experiences in camp operations. Corporal Rita Vasquez, now Rita Morales, age 55, running a community center in San Antonio, told her about March 23, 1945. Dr. Forrester tracked down Private Eugene Chen, now Eugene Chen, age 53, co-owner of a successful auto repair business in Seattle. Chen still had the documentation he'd typed that day, 7 pages, carbon copies, precise timestamps. Dr. Forrester found Captain Sarah Brennan, now Dr. Sarah Brennan, age 64, teaching at Johns Hopkins Medical School. Brennan remembered every detail, and Dr. Forrester found 23 of the original 127 German women who'd been processed through Camp Ruston on March 23, 1945. One of them was Margareta Schiller, the gray-haired nurse who'd asked Mallory why he was helping them. Schiller was 71 in 1975, living in Hamburg, working as a hospital administrator. She remembered the American sergeant's exact words, "Because a better man than me said this is not what we're supposed to be." Dr. Forrester asked if she knew what he'd meant. Schiller said she'd found out years later through the Red Cross about Private David Morrison, about the letter, about Morrison dying in Germany while she was safe in Louisiana because one man had read that letter and decided regulations could wait until human beings were treated with dignity. "That sergeant," Schiller said, "gave us back something the war had taken. He reminded us we were still people, not just prisoners, not just the enemy. People." Dr. Forrester finally located James Mallory in 1976. He was 58 years old, living in Billings, Montana, working as a high school counselor. He'd returned to Fromberg after the war, married a teacher named Claire, raised 3 children. He walked with a limp from the Kasserine Pass shrapnel. He coached junior varsity baseball. He volunteered at the VA hospital. He'd never mentioned Camp Ruston to his family. Dr. Forrester showed him the documentation, the amended protocol, the interviews with the women who remembered him. Mallory read through everything slowly. "I didn't do anything special," he said finally. "I just followed Morrison's example. He was the one who understood what we were supposed to be." "But you're the one who acted," Dr. Forrester said. "You're the one who changed the system." Mallory shook his head. "Rita Vasquez changed the system. Sarah Brennan changed the system. Eugene Chen changed the system. Margaret Chen and every other WAC who made it work, they changed the system. I just didn't stop them." Dr. Forrester's dissertation was published in 1978 under the title Protocol and Humanity, The Evolution of Female POW Treatment in the U.S. Military, 1945-1975. It included a chapter on the events of March 23, 1945. The dissertation was read by approximately 150 academics and military historians. In 1982, the U.S. Army's POW Operations Historical Division conducted a review of significant protocol innovations between 1941 and 1975. The review mentioned amended Protocol 47B, but attributed its development to multiple operational factors and field recommendations. Staff Sergeant James Mallory was not mentioned. In 1989, Rita Morales organized a reunion of former Camp Ruston personnel in San Antonio. 17 people attended, including Eugene Chen from Seattle and Sarah Brennan from Baltimore. James Mallory declined the invitation. His wife Claire told them he didn't like attention, preferred to remember Morrison rather than be remembered himself. James Mallory died on November 4, 1994, at age 76 in Billings, Montana. His obituary in the Billings Gazette noted his service in North Africa, his work as a high school counselor, his 47 years of marriage to Claire, his 3 children and 8 grandchildren. It did not mention Camp Ruston, March 23, 1945, or the 127 German women whose treatment changed because a staff sergeant from Fromberg remembered that prisoners were people. In 2003, the U.S. Army updated its training protocols for handling enemy prisoners. The update included a case study module on ethical decision-making in ambiguous situations. The case study described a hypothetical scenario involving a sergeant who must decide between following orders and adapting procedures to meet operational realities and humane treatment standards. The scenario was based on the events of March 23, 1945. The sergeant in the case study was given a different name. Today, there is no memorial to Staff Sergeant James Mallory at Camp Ruston, which was decommissioned in 1945 and eventually converted to Louisiana Tech University property. There is no plaque commemorating amended Protocol 47B, but in the U.S. Army's POW Operations Manual, Section 12, Subsection 4, Paragraph 7, there is a regulation that requires clean facilities and appropriate privacy for all prisoners during processing, regardless of gender. The regulation has no attribution, it simply exists, the way all good ideas eventually do, as if it had always been obvious, as if no one had ever needed to risk anything to make it real. If this story moved you, we need your help to make sure these forgotten heroes aren't lost forever. Hit that like button. It tells YouTube to share this with people who care about real history, not just Hollywood versions. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of ordinary people who made extraordinary choices when no one was watching. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Do you have a family member who served? What would you have done in Mallory's position? Stories like this survive because people like you keep them alive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for remembering. The men and women who did the right thing when it cost them something, they deserve that much.